Ideally, step away one step from the red, from the blue wall. One step forward. And then we just get in a bit closer together, please.
Yes, please. Please, down, center. Yeah.
Okay, so we look, start looking that way. So look that side, and then keep your body straight to the front and just your eyes to the left.
Yeah.
And facing the middle.
This side, please.
Facing the middle.
In the middle.
And facing towards the right hand side.
Center.
Okay, can we have everyone back up from Steve and M.I.A, please? Start on the far side. Start on the far side.
This one. Nice one. Big smile. Over the camera, big first of you.
Okay, move to the middle, please.
Yeah, down.
Look dead straight to the middle.
This side. Yeah.
And look to this side, please.
Let's go. Two steps. And right again, please. Wait a second.
Okay, Steve, if I can bring you up now. Thank you. Oh my God. M.I.A, can you just stay please now with your eyes that way?
And over here, please.
And back into the center.
One step forward, please. One step forward. Okay, great. Mia. Up here in the second row, please. Mia. That's way down, first row. One left.
Okay, great. And M.I.A out, Steve, please. On your right. Arms down, Steve.
And once again,
In the right, in the middle, please.
please, down. Here after. Go back, please. Please, down, first row.
This side, please. This side.
Down here.
Great. Thank you, everyone. Thank you very much.
Thank you. So, hello. Hello and welcome to the press conference of the panorama film Matangi, M.I.A, M.I.A. And I'm very happy to introduce to you the director of the film, Steve Loveridge. And I am delighted to introduce to you the singer, songwriter, artist, and for some of us, icon, Matangi, M.I.A, Pragasam, M.I.A herself, ladies and gentlemen.
Amen. Danke.
I will start with you, Maya. Maya, as a pop star, you have to cope with the fact that images and representations of you are permanently created by media and culture industries. Sometimes they praise your persona and work, but sometimes they also give you a hard time, especially in regards to your political statements. I think this film sheds light to a slightly different M.I.A, gives some background information we did not know in this particular context yet. And I would like to ask you to comment on the image and the representation of yourself that is created in this film. So what I want to know, how would you comment on the image of M.I.A, M.I.A we see in the film?
I haven't fully digested it. Obviously, there's a lot of conversations to be had between me and Steve, which sometimes, even after Sundance, which is the time I saw it, I've seen it 1.5 times, and I haven't really talked to Steve since Sundance. So, to me, you know, having had that time, and I'm about to see it again tonight, it's a different, watching it here, I think it's going to be different to watching it in America. And for me, yeah, it's the initial shock of having so much personal stuff be in the film. It was very difficult because it almost, puts you in a position where you have to make a choice of dealing with it or completely not dealing with it and letting it all just be a part of the past. Yeah. So.
I mean, for me, I was listening the last days again to all your albums, and while I was hearing this heavy beats that sometimes sound like gunfire, and while I was hearing your radical lyrics, I actually had to immediately think of the Tamil female fighters I saw in the film. So I saw you as a fighter that transformed her war zone experiences into beats, into sounds, in the sublime art you do. And so for me, the film was helpful to contextualize your work. I also, for the first time, really understood that all I want to do is a bang, 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 and a clink, clink, and take your money is not a radical gesture, but actually an ironical reference to how people see migrants. So for me, it was helpful. How is it for you? Do you think, also given the fact that your message sometimes is difficult to pass through, do you think that this film would be a vehicle for you to pass your message through? Can we actually understand more?
I've been thinking about what that message is, and obviously the era it's coming out in is put that sort of context to it. But I gave Steve the footage in 2011, in a different era and different time, in a different political climate. And so the fact that the film comes out in 2018 puts it in those contexts. But I don't want to limit it to just an immigrant story or a film about refugees, because it's more than that. To me, it was a film about so many different things. You know, if you want to talk about just from the time I gave him the footage to now, there's, the amount of poor people in the world is expanded by billions, And even if it's just a journey about economics, or if it's a journey about saying no to the establishment, or it's a journey about race or gender or ethnicity. You know, there's so many other things you can discuss. So I didn't want to like reduce it to the immigrant story, because within it is also the fact that I'm just trying to be a creative the whole time, and you know, to be accepted as a creative person with just normal ideas. And I think so to me it's like I do think about that. I'm like, what, you know, I wonder how I would think about it, or how people would think about it, just for the nature of the time it's come out and how long it took Steve to make that film, you know.
I think the film derives its particular quality from this incredible archival footage we see. And it's actually your footage. Actually, a lot of the film, big parts of the film you shot yourself. It's very interesting to see the Sri Lanka footage for us, especially. That is footage that you never made into a film when you still wanted to become a documentary filmmaker. And I was thinking that actually M.I.A. became a filmmaker as M.I.A. You yourself have created and directed so many important music videos. So actually I thought you yourself have a lot of experience in both shooting and directing film. So the question is, why have you never thought of taking all this incredible archive footage of your life and making something yourself? Or to put it differently, why did you give away the footage in the first place?
That's a really good question. I never thought of it. I don't know why. I think it's because I didn't think that that was the film. And what I gave Steve in 2010 and 11 was the repercussions to me making the M.I.A. album and what happened after that. So it was just purely my journey from 2010 to 2011. And the footage I gave him was just what it was like to be a new mum, because my baby was like 6 months old, going on tour, having made this album that said connected to the Google, connected to the government, and the whole entire world was coming down on you, and what that felt like. And it was before WikiLeaks and Snowden and all that stuff. So it was a very, in my opinion, it was a very universal problem, that we were talking about privacy and computers and all of these things, and it wasn't even an immigrant story. It was just, this is you trying to talk about subjects that I thought was completely relevant and very current affairs. And then, you know, you were made out to be like this crazy paranoid person. And that's not really what's in the film, you know, in Steve's version of the film, but that's what I handed. You know, I was like, here's all the tour footage of that era, and this is all the behind-the-scenes stuff that happened. And these were the conversations, and this is what I was getting, you know, blocked out of and slapped down and been taught a lesson. And, you know, this is what the press said at the time, and this is what was going on. And it was like my moment when I was getting Charlie Sheened. And then obviously I've been Charlie Sheened so many times for different reasons, that Steve was like, oh, that's not the only time, you know, and that there's actually more to it. And I started asking for more and more footage. So I never tried to put my entire thing into context. So that's not the film. I don't know, but that's not the film I wanted to make, because I just felt like that was it. You know, I tried to be a documentary filmmaker and I failed, and that's you know, that's up to other people to do it, and you know, I'm going to try something else. And yeah, and Steve came along and made it into the documentary that he made. But obviously, all along it was a guessing game of what the film was going to be. Yeah.
I will go to Steve in a moment. Yes, Steve, thank you for this very insightful, truly insightful, and also I think political film. You created a film that is less about M.I.A. the star, where the grandmother might be as important or even more important than Jay-Z.
Yeah.
You showed a very sensitive and human film. You gave a lot of weight to the footage in Sri Lanka. You not only put it in the beginning, like in a chronological structure of a classical biopic, you come back to it until the end. So the question is, how did you arrive at this choice of focus to show this M.I.A. and not another one? And is it a process also deriving from the footage, or was it your initial interest?
I think because I've known M.I.A. since 1995, I was actually present and watching this story happen in real life. So I was friends with her for a good 7 years before she started making music. And so my interest in her was I'd already committed as a friend and found her fascinating and interesting, and we made work together and had a good time. So all of those stories around what her life was like before being M.I.A., I knew was so rich and interesting, and I'd watched her make these documentaries that nobody had seen, so I always remembered in the back of my mind, there's these tapes in your mum's garage or in her attic that, have all this good stuff on. And when M.I.A. gave them to me, she didn't watch them, so she hadn't actually watched them back since lots of them were shot, so really couldn't remember what was on the tapes. And her expectations were like, oh, there's not much in these, I don't know how you're going to make a film out of them, because I think she was very aware of the films that she was trying to make at the time and them not having the footage that served those films enough for them to get finished. But she couldn't remember that there were actually all these amazing moments where she turns the camera on herself or reveals something about herself, and just by having the camera running so much, I was able to snip all the bits of M.I.A. Developing her identity in between being a filmmaker.
Yes, you said also you knew the stories long before the public knew it. Was it for you also an effort to create a counter-narration of what you think the public representation of her was?
Yes and no. I think it wasn't an attempt to kind of chase down bad press or kind of rewrite the story that when journalists had attacked M.I.A. or anything. That's water under the bridge, and those moments have passed. But I thought it was really important to show, to join some of the dots and just say these songs or this music video, when you see them in context of her entire life and the story arc of her life, they make so much sense. Like you were saying, you listen to the album having seen the film, and suddenly you notice different bits of beats and lyrics and images that stand out because they've been given some more context. And I think that's something, when I watch M.I.A. work, that I'm always hovering over her going, oh, you need to explain that, say that, and people don't know, but she's kind of focused on a creative vision of making a piece of work and not too worried about what other people think of her, whereas I always worry about what people think of it. So the documentary does help explain some of the work and give it context, but it's not about making people like M.I.A. I think it's an open film where you can make your own judgments about what she says and disagree with her, and she changes a lot throughout the film. It goes from somebody who's 22 years old, or maybe even younger at the beginning of the film, to someone who's much older than that now. And it's different people, she changes a lot.
I mean, you said in your blog it is exciting to work with her and also addictive. You wrote it in 2012. You were together as students, right? And then you went on to animation and illustration.
Yeah.
And here you come back with a debut film. It's your debut film after this film studies, actually. My question to you, my last question, would be if you're going to continue as a documentary filmmaker, or if this film was actually your lifetime film project that is only bound to this fascination and friendship you had with M.I.A.
I don't know. I don't think I would make another straight documentary film. It's such a massive undertaking that you really, it's so much more difficult than I ever anticipated, both emotionally, financially, time-wise, like the level of commitment that you need to go. I have so much respect for documentary makers now, having seen how challenging it is. This was obviously an unusual one because I knew the subject matter and we were friends and had a relationship, but I think I am interested in storytelling, but I think I might blend it together with the animation work, the 3D that I do, that kind of thing. That's where I'm heading, I think, rather than straight film.
The guy that stayed the same forever.
Yeah.
Because this one changed so much that I wouldn't really ask anyone to put this film together. In fact, that there's loads of things about the film that I'm kind of still processing, but the fact that you finished it and it's got a thing for 90 minutes is kind of pretty impressive. So yeah, as a thing, I think you just have to maybe choose like a documentary about a tree or something like that.
Something that stays the same. Okay, I will open to the colleagues. There is a question here.
Sure, thank you. Stephen Schaefer, Boston Herald. A wonderful, wonderful movie. Maya, what kind of restrictions, if any, did you put on Steve about making the film? Who retains final cut on this kind of thing? And if you had a chance to do it over, would you say yes or no?
100% yes. I had no influence really because Steve took the tapes and he moved to New York City in 2014 or something, 13 or 14. So for 4 years, I haven't really had access to Steve. And
Mike couldn't get a visa, so
I couldn't get a visa, and I think he deliberately did that. And so I couldn't sit in on the edit. And even as a friend who studied with him and who made creative work throughout my career, like he didn't invite me to give him an opinion, let alone the fact that it's about me. So we're still working that out in our relationship. But yeah, I had to basically get a private detective to go to America and turn up last year, and confiscate the tapes. Because, yeah, at one point... No, I'm not kidding.
No, it wasn't really a private detective. It was somebody turned up.
It was somebody I had to,
Maya basically started to lose patience with how long the film was taking and just sent someone to get the tapes back. But we'd already digitized them all, so it didn't really make a difference.
But obviously I started getting the feeling after 3 years of not hearing from Steve that he was living this amazing life in New York City, and meanwhile I'm banned from America, and it just didn't add up. So I was kind of like, well, he's obviously sold me out, and he's working for somebody in Hollywood and just giving all my tapes to them, or I don't know.
It was like a
I have an
massive
imagination,
test of our trust.
It's not really paranoia, because I guess the story came out that Laura Porteous had made this film called Risk, and that same thing had happened, and they had to go, the footage got moved to New York, and then they had to have legal battles to get it back, and it just put me in a situation that I felt, it was a very sensitive period in America, and it was very difficult to be an outsider voice, whether you were like a non-American saying anything about anything. It was just an impossible time. And I felt that story or my life experience was going to get put through this one-dimensional kind of, the spectacles or whatever, and I didn't want it to be like that, and I saw it more of a global kind of universal experience, and so that was when I got a bit like, I don't want to be that, like, I much rather not tell my story if it's going to be put through that thing, and I'm just like a poster child for, this is Jihadi John's life, you know, and this is his family, and this is how crazy they all are, and I didn't want to be that story. And I was feeling like it was very close, you know, that production companies he'd been in contact with, and some edits that he'd started making, we were like, you know, I didn't want to start the film, or I never felt the need to tell my story at the cost of all these other people, you know, that might get perceived that way. So, yeah, I had no say in it in the end, and it had to be 100% trust-based. But I think he did okay. Yeah.
Thank you.
But you could have sued him even, no?
I could have sued him.
Exactly,
yeah.
she did not.
That's right.
I haven't got any money.
I feel like, you know, now my thing is, why did you leave out this complicated bit and this complicated bit? You know, like, I feel like he's made it as normal. He's normalized me, which is a good thing. You know, but like at the same time, I think he had a very difficult job, because especially at the beginning of my life, there was a lot more craziness, you know, and it's interesting that you...
I heard of 700 hours of footage.
I think more than that. That's sort of M.I.A.'s filming, but then there's, obviously we rang around and got all the archive we could get, and so there's, you know, people gave us all the media interviews, all the tour footage, all the music career, all that stuff. So yeah, all added together, it's way over 1,000 hours, and just quite a lot of watching, and then all of it's full of content. It's not just a kind of batch of footage of somebody making albums in a music studio. It's Maya out and about, meeting family, talking to people, having all of these different kind of journeys in her life. So it's very difficult to pick through and sort of find clarity and have the confidence to pick out one particular thread, because there were so many temptations of different avenues to go down, and we tried a lot of stuff that hasn't made the final cut, but is
like my entire catalogue of work. And yeah, and I thought some early stuff in Sri Lanka could have been added in, because
all of it, all the way through, there's just so much potential to tell stuff, but if we lingered too long on any one particular thing, the balance of the whole film goes out. You've only got an hour and 36 minutes to tell 22 years of stuff, well, longer.
But obviously I didn't have a chance to say any of this stuff before the film came out. So. In what? Like, in my life?
In giving me the tapes and having a film made.
Oh, no. I think someone had to do it. You know, I was thinking the next person who would have practiced so much patience is probably someone on death row. But, you know, Steve did a really good job.
We have a question here in the middle.
Hi, Ella Kemp from Into the Fold. Maya, I'm just wondering, now that this documentary is finished, there were rumours, well, it was said that your last album was going to be your last. Now that the film's come out, has that prompted something different in your career? Would you make more music or a film or anything?
Well, yeah, I do feel some sort of way that Steve's made a film and I haven't. So
you're going to make a film?
I'm going to make a film. Yeah, I do.
Or any more music or anything else? Any other project?
Maybe I'll squash it with music and it'll be a musical.
We have a question on the right-hand side.
Hi guys, Peter White from Deadline. Just watched it, really enjoyed the movie.
Thank you.
Many documentaries about musicians tend to end with their end, you know, in terms of them dying or you know, having told the story many years before. And obviously, I wondered, you know, how did you get to the stage of how I would end that movie? You know, what point did you, was that tricky to try and figure out where to end the film. And separately, given that you were quite good friends, and went to school together, did you sort of fear that you didn't want to make a hagiography essentially of someone you know, and you wanted to be objective as possible?
In terms of the ending, when we were doing the new filming, we went out and followed M.I.A making this music video that she did in Chennai in India called Borders, and it contains so many of the themes that are in the film that it felt like a really good way to bookend, because she was being a creative but actually visually making work to do with the very beginning of the immigrant journey, and that just felt like a great place to start and end the movie. And then I've forgotten the second half of your question, sorry.
You want to make a hagiography of a friend?
Yeah, making something about somebody you know is so difficult, and the trust, I wouldn't have gone into it unless I was really secure in what we were doing. And from my part, I would have absolutely been prepared to drop it if at any stage M.I.A and her family had been like, we're really uncomfortable with this. But yeah, like you say, most music documentaries are very different to this, and I think that I just knew the footage was so good, I could remember it, and I was like, that needs to be out there. And it was quite difficult at the beginning to sort of wrestle it off the music industry and take it out of that context and get it to the film world, going, this has actually got enough meat on it to be a proper film that belongs next to other documentaries, not something that's out there next to albums and music videos and is serving some kind of promotional thing for the music industry to just feed off to promote other work. And I'm really glad that it's ended up, I couldn't have hoped for more, that it's at these film festivals being taken really seriously. It's really nice to do, even to do press. I never actually answer the questions when M.I.A was doing M.I.A press, but you watch it and this is so much more respectful, and just it's really nice to see the story in this context.
You want to comment?
Well, I put the same level of seriousness into music press too. It's just they don't take it seriously.
We don't have to advertise products and do stuff
and
do all the cheesy stuff that you have
I always
to
do things not advertising a product.
Mm-hmm.
That is the problem with me as an artist, is that I don't do that enough, and they drop me or tell me off.
Yeah, that's what I mean.
But you thought that I was going to do that. But yeah, he didn't really... Steve told me that's really why he didn't allow me to come into the edit, is that he thought I would hijack it for it to be a promotional tool. Yet, I'm very bad at selling my albums and nobody buys them. So, I didn't really take that as a good enough excuse. I think...
there are a couple of music documentaries out there where the artist has been very involved and has edited it, and I don't like it. I don't want people to make... there's something in me that balks at the idea of here's a successful, famous person telling their own story, but controlling the edit and all that kind of thing. And I think
every time when something crazy happened in the last 5 years, I'd think it was Steve, who was sort of...
manipulating your life so that I had more story.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
I started thinking that because sometimes just shit would come out of nowhere.
I did watch other documentaries and start to think, it's really good when they die at the end. That's... and just be like...
Yes, but why not even an authorization?
A what?
To ask for authorization.
Well, we did, obviously, she had to sign a form to say you've got permission to take these tapes and do that kind of thing. So I had authorization in that sense to make the film. But to keep checking in and going...
This was from 2012 or something.
Yeah, to keep checking in with the edit and going, do you like this so far? It's too difficult to have that objectivity from her. And I think... probably if M.I.A had watched it and not seen it in the context of an audience and see other people see it, that's what's really helped her to understand what the film is from my point of view. Because someone watching a film about themselves, it's just too difficult, to know how you
I'm just too tired to take you to court.
Good.
It's taken so long for the film to get made that I'm just like exhausted. And I'm like, just do what you want. I don't care. And, you know, I just have to treat it as therapy, really, like free therapy. And I just get to sort of watch it and let go and, you know, just, try to write something a bit better than that, I guess, to make a film. Yeah.
Not everyone needs to be a filmmaker. You're a very good music maker. You know, it's another
Talk
medium.
To the label. They'll tell you something else.
I think you should make a film.
But you
and I'll come
wanted
to your premiere.
You wanted to have also a film with all this footage, so.
Yeah, it's really weird becoming. That was always the conflict, you know, when you become the thing, because that is a difficult thing. Like, it's sort of, I could digest it when it's, as a musician. And the documentary that I thought he was making was like a live tour thing, and it's about, you know, that one particular album, just because visually that album was, to me, it was really interesting. And the the artwork and the video stuff that we'd made, and it was like this you know, I really saw it as like an artistic thing that would, maybe you're right, that it would be like, it's not really a promotional thing to sell the record, but it was to explain why that record was the way it was. And I thought, also, it was a really important thing to explain, because the years that were going to come after, young people might need to know certain things. And so it was really about that, you know, to show how hard something is, and it's about like endurance, you know. And then I didn't really think, you know, my personal life never was about all the stuff that happened before I was M.I.A. was not really something that it wasn't a very like...
Filmic.
It wasn't very filmic, and it is the outtakes that Steve made the film of, you know, because the shots that when he's like, oh, the tapes were so good, in my head, the tapes are good for totally different shots, you know, to the ones that Steve's talking about. And initially I started documenting all these things even before I was at St. Martin's, was because my brother was 16 and he ended up in Young Offenders Institute. So I was using the film camera just to help him understand what he was going through. So even that moment, it wasn't like, you know, hey, I'm doing a selfie video. It was like, oh, you should see what's happening to you in you know, in like an objective way, and to understand it. It was more sort of like therapy with the video camera. And so that is weird, handing those tapes, but I really, even when I gave it to him, it was, you know, like I said, it was during my difficult time, and I really didn't have the time to know what's on the tapes or to look through them, and there's so many, and I just handed it over to Steve. But those difficult kind of family stuff was, I don't know, it was too emotional to, you know what I mean, for me to even begin to talk about in the press in that way. Because even as M.I.A, I wanted to keep it very sort of open and more collective thinking based, you know, and that it was more about a certain community, and you're talking about a bunch of people that are going through this thing. And I'd use the personal story just to say I'm talking from experience, you know, and I'm not a politician and I don't have the right words and I'm not like articulating myself as a politician, but I come from experience, and that's the only time I'd refer to my own, experience. But it was never a thing to actually use those tapes. So I think that, that was like...
What I heard you said is, don't make a victim out of me, don't make a tragedy of my life.
Yeah, it's true. I didn't want to be, it's not a victim story because...
And I find those early tapes really interesting because at the time, you don't know it's all going to turn out all right and that Maya's going to end up being a pop star and being successful. When she was filming, she didn't know she was ever going to make music, had no aspirations to, and so she's actually in a really difficult situation while she's filming those tapes, and I have a lot of respect that she carried on doing that while she didn't have a job, while it was, the tough years where you don't know who you're going to be, you graduate and then you can't find work, and it's difficult. So to have the conviction to go and make that work and be interested in that, I think it's really interesting to watch someone when they don't know who they're going to be and they don't know that it's all going to turn out okay, just explore who they are. Like, it's really amazing footage to me. It's not cinematic, it's not filmic, it's kind of intimate and it's on cheap cameras and stuff, but I love it. It's got an atmosphere to it and a quality that I think is a different kind of intimacy to everyone filming themselves on Instagram now and stuff. It's really someone really documenting themselves and just sticking the camera on a cupboard or whatever and just letting it run and seeing what happens. So watching hours and hours of that, there was just some really amazing things, moments in your life that you captured.
Yeah, it's like a journey in technology, as Steve put it. That you go from like high A and mini DV, and then get a computer, and then it's on iChat, and then Steve becomes a filmmaker and can afford to rent a proper camera.
Yeah,
and that footage looks shit. I can't believe that. Yeah, the modern stuff is very. Yeah, it's more consciously like filmed.
We would have to come to an end.
Okay, good.
If you have any final comment, that's your time.
No, just thank you all very much for coming and your interest in the film.
Thank you. Yes.
Thank you, Steve. Thank you, Maya.